Good evening, everyone. We're going to get started in 1 minute, 60 seconds. Most of you are seated, but if everyone else can get all settled and snuggle in, we're ready to go.
An urban forest means living in a city, but still having access to all the benefits of forestry, all the benefits of trees, all the social, economic, and health benefits that comes along with it.
I think of it being a place for people to be in nature and feel like they've got a place to escape from the city a little bit.
An urban forest means to me bringing the peace, calm, and tranquility of the forest into our urban settings.
I think of trees, and I think of places where you can play, and you can play hide and go seek, and you can have picnics and gather with your family.
All right. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here today. Together, we're here to strengthen a movement that sets a tone for growing Tacoma's urban forest and our region's vibrant future. I'm Michael Yadrick, president of Tacoma Tree Foundation's board of directors. And my why for being here tonight, personally, as an ecologist and father, I believe in the power of the tree foundations to help us all come together via forests and cities as a vehicle for peace building across cultures, across different ancestries, abilities, different ages and genders. Thank you. So as a whole, though, Tacoma Tree Foundation, we believe in the power of trees to transform communities, help us adapt to change, and bring people together. This work is only possible through our collective efforts. Every tree we plant, every volunteer hour, and community partnerships help us realize our shared vision. So we live, work, and gather tonight on the traditional lands of the Puyallup people. The Puyallup have stewarded these lands and waters for generations. Their ancestral connection to this place reminds us of our responsibility to show up as welcome guests, listening, learning, and honoring treaties as living commitments to Indigenous self-determination and sovereignty. The Puyallup people are still here, practicing their Twilshutzee language and traditions. So may this gathering inspire us to follow their example of stewardship, to deepen our care for this place, and to organize alongside Indigenous communities as comrades in a shared future of stewardship and justice. In that spirit, we wouldn't be able to connect like this without our incredible sponsors and comrades. First and foremost, feel free to wave if I name you. The Tacoma Tree Foundation Development Committee. Anybody out there? Yeah, and TT and Tacoma Tree Foundation staff, particularly, Adela Ramos in the back there. Thank you. Thank you for all you do. Donna Thompson. Yes. Donna's OG Tacoma Tree Foundation board member, steadfast supporter, and her contributions without them, the raffle wouldn't be a thing tonight. So thank Donna for that. Davey Tree Experts, our new partners in this work. Jenny Wetzel Holmes. Jenny is one of my comrades on the board, and her advocacy for Tacoma's green future is truly inspiring. Peaks and Pints for their in-kind donation support of today's social gathering. We really enjoy supporting local businesses like them that give back to the community. Vivian DeSwager, whose efforts made this event eligible to the International Society of Arboriculture Overlords that allowed us to give continuing education credits for our arborist friends. Yep. In that way, we're growing our community of urban forestry professionals and friends. And then the UW Tacoma Office of Community Partnerships for providing this beautiful venue. All right, and now is my great honor to introduce today's featured speaker, Jeffrey Thomas. Jeffrey is a lifelong Muckleshoot tribal elder and fisheries biologist who has dedicated decades to advancing Indigenous sovereignty and environmental stewardship. He has led the Puyallup Tribal Fisheries Department's Timber, Fish, and Wildlife Program for over 30 years, and he has also been a tireless advocate for the Tacoma Indian Center as well. So I've had the privilege of working with Jeffrey through the Medicine Creek Forestry Collaborative. And so Jeffrey has taught me, and I think so many others, that stewardship of the land is not just about technical expertise and policy analysis, that it's also about developing really authentic relationships that cultivate deep respect for the land's history and our shared future. So his voice is vital to these conversations tonight, and we are incredibly fortunate to hear from him today. So please welcome him up. Thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend. All righty. Well, boy, it sure is a privilege to be with you all tonight. And thank you so much for the gracious introduction, Michael. Michael and I have been working together for at least the last 2 years alongside Lowell Weiss. And so we've been doing our best to really develop this idea of a Medicine Creek Southern Forests Leadership Council. So let me just welcome you then. I'm here to welcome you, and I'm just going to take a few minutes to also welcome you to the world of the Upper Puyallup Chief, Colombian Satulut. Maybe you haven't heard of him. Maybe you'll learn something about him tonight. Now, what's an Upper Puyallup? If we're in the Lower Puyallup area, then as you move up the river valley, you start getting into the lands of the Upper Puyallup. You know, if you had a saltwater orientation, you were a Lower Puyallup. If you had more of an upland, plateau, prairie orientation, inland orientation, you were going to be an Upper Puyallup. Even they considered the Indians of Upper Wapato Creek, even that close to the saltwater, Upper Puyallups. You know, the Muckleshoot tribe says that they are made up of Upper Puyallups, among other things. And there's reasons for that. They say they're a dual treaty tribe, that they're from the Point Elliott side of the treaty boundary, and they're from the Medicine Creek Treaty side of the treaty boundary. You know, that treaty boundary was established in December 1854 with the Medicine Creek Treaty, which means that the northern edge of the Puyallup lands was established as being at the White River Divide. It says there, if you want to know where the treaty line is, go up to Point Pulley there at Des Moines, draw a line over to the White River drainage, run along the divide all the way into the mountains, and you'll be anything south of that, that would be in today's South Prairie Creek, Carbon River drainage, and Puyallup River drainage. That's all Medicine Creek. That goes pretty far down into Thurston County and beyond. But on the northern side then of that line, which again is the White River Divide, is going to be Point Elliott Treaty Country. So why does that matter? Well, Chief Colombian Satulut, as his son described him, he was one of the lead organizers of the Battle of Seattle. A little further down the watershed, if he was an Upper White River Indian, then you follow that White River. Historically, it brought you to Duwamish River and Elliott Bay and Seattle. So it's not like he didn't know the lands. And being from where he was, the village he was from, which was White River, just outside of Buckley, then think about it. As you go now up the Puyallup Valley, and then you get to the forks of the Carbon and the Puyallup River right around Ording, and then you keep following it over towards South Prairie, eventually you're at the bottom of a hill. And if you go to the top of that hill, you find Buckley. Buckley on the White River. You've just crossed the divide. He was from the White River, but he was the head man of the people all the way down to the Puyallup River. That's why he's important. So when I talk about the history of the Puyallup tribe in the Upper Puyallups, then I might as well mention him. And right here you see some a photograph on the right-hand side, and you know that was taken in what do they call that? City Park in downtown Seattle, and it's showing here that here's some of the shot fired by the USS Decatur at the Indians who were attacking Seattle in January of 1856. They recovered it. They're on the hillside. So as Lieutenant Phillips of the USS Decatur identified, there was different Native groups that were part of that original skirmish there in Seattle. He talks about how they included the Nisquallies, the Puyallups, and the Lake Indians, the ones that live near Lake Washington. And he put a number at 6,000 warriors, probably way overestimated, right? But look who he identifies as being one of the three generals, Coquilton. So it's in the historical record. Coquilton attacked Seattle. And 2 days after the battle, he even threatened them with a messenger. Within 1 moon, I'll return with 20,000 warriors. Now I'm going to attack by land and water. I'm going to destroy the place in spite of all the warship can do to prevent it. So, anyway, he's a little, might consider him a warrior of his day. But, if you were to rewind maybe 15 years earlier in 1841, the Wilkes expedition relied upon him. As they left Hudson Bay Company, Fort Nisqually, and decided that they were going to explore the interior of eastern Washington, they had to get over the mountains. So they did it through the Natchez Pass. And they were told, when you get over to Porter's Prairie after crossing the White River, then send a muckleshoot and ask for old Chief Coquilton. He'll tell you how to get the rest of the way. So he came over, he pictured out what the trail would be like going across the mountains, and then offered him 2 guides and his brother and his nephew, who did go with the party and then came back, safely a few months later. So the family was trying to do their part, I guess, back then, to accommodate the new arrivals. So, but then we have the treaty. We do have the 1854 Treaty of the Medicine Creek Treaty. I've mentioned it. Then, so there afterwards was a treaty war because, if you were a Puyallup in those days, they told you, and it was specific in the treaty, you're going to get 2 square miles for your new reservation. It's going to be over there where Old Town is today. It's going to include that hill going up along the shoreline. And who cares if it's just fully forested right now? That's where you guys got to go. Well, there's a lot of reasons to resist the terms of the treaty. Things that had been misrepresented, including like Chief Westshai's signature, right? And he was a nephew of a Yakima warrior family, the chief's family. His mom was their sister. So he was well aware of how they were feeling on the east side of the state, let alone the west side of the state. And you got the Natchez Trail connecting them. And you have that Coquilton village at Boise Creek there guarding the mountains going both ways. Coquilton was a part of what was going on in those days on the Natchez Trail. So his son, Slugamus Coquilton, then, I'll mention him. He was born about 1818 on Bronze Point over there in Commencement Bay. And he's the son of, old Chief Coquilton, of course. Now, he worked for Hudson Bay Company at the time Wilkes was here. And then later on, he took the Washington State Historical Society to that site in 1906 and said it was happened here, and they erected a monument. And then from that point forward, people have known it as American Lake. Now, there's a couple of tales in here about his participation in the war, stealing horses from the soldiers, escaping capture, this kind of thing. And their family name's on that Medicine Creek Treaty. They're not quite sure was it him or his dad that did the signing. But here's a picture of him in 1906. He's in the middle there. And then there's also a picture here, and you see a family line there, Coquilton, Slugamus, Teresa, Herbert, June, Jeannie, Jeffrey. I'm Jeffrey. Okay, and so you see here then, Coquilton, Slugamus Coquilton, the son, and then you see my grandmother, June, his great-granddaughter, and my mom and me, my family. And me, when I was member of my mom's dance group in Seattle All-American Indian Dancers, I've been about 10 years old. So now, just to sort of, bring it back to Tacoma. So this is a picture of Tacoma in 1874. Well, when was Tacoma founded? 1873, when the railroad arrived. We are a railroad town. Everybody remember that, right? There was no town, and then they said, we don't want the terminus to be Seattle, we want it to be Tacoma, so get it ready. 6 months later, that happened in summer. They held the grand opening right around Christmas of the new town called Tacoma. So it says here, this rough landscape was that presented in Tacoma in 1874 at Pacific Avenue and 6th and 7th Streets. The barn was Cogswell's, and it stood where the Northern Pacific headquarters building now stands. The road leading to the railroad, Steamer Wharf, is partially shown. This bit of town was called New Tacoma to distinguish it from the other place 2 miles away that usually bore that name, Tacoma. So then what are we looking at? We're on the Tacoma Bluff. We're looking down onto the Puyallup River, across the tide flats. Then you're seeing the Puyallup Reservation. Maybe it looks a little clearer there. This is in 1891. And so you can see the Puyallup Reservation, you know, with that church steeple way off in the background in 1891. You can see the agency campus buildings there. That's basically the First Creek area today, Portland Avenue. Of course, there where the tree line's at, that's where you'd more or less find Tacoma Dome. So, you know, again, this is, and look at these trees. Oh my gosh, if that's an 1891 town, and you know, and they've been St. Paul Tacoma Lumber Company's there on the boot, of course. And this is when the Puyallup River was still, the main channel was emptying out towards the bluff rather than towards the bay like we know of it today. But fir log 9 foot through en route for the sawmill, Tacoma, Washington. Whoa. Look right there. See a big stump anywhere? Like in the foreground? See a big tree? I wonder if they, you know, some correlation, right? But now that's who I am. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm working with Lowell. That's why I'm working with Michael. That's why I care about the city. That's why I serve the tribe. And I'm a Muckleshoot. I'm a Muckleshoot tribal elder. I'm from that Coquitlam family. So I'm enrolled up there. But there is branches of I have relatives down here at Puyallup. I even have a son enrolled at the tribe. But, you know, because it's holiday season, then I might as well tell you what I'm thankful for, right? Okay. So I'm thankful for the 1980 U.S. versus Washington phase 2 of the Bolt decision under Judge Orrick, because that's when the federal decision in which they decide fish need protection. And when they did that, they, you know, the perception and the expectation was that's going to apply to all commercial development and all forest land use. And the state government has a duty to prevent private landowners, developers from unreasonably degrading habitat. And they actually must take reasonable steps to mitigate any adverse effects of development on fisheries. Like, okay, wow, thank you. Because before that, it was just that 74 decision saying we have the right to harvest fish from the river. But didn't say have to guarantee there's going to be any in there. Now, in 74, when that decision came out, I was 16 years old. I was starting the University of Washington that fall. I had a 9-month-old baby. And then it continued on throughout the 70s. In 79, they finally brought that case to a close. And that was the same year that I graduated from the University of Washington. So my entire, you know, existence at the University of Washington was all while they were working out the Bolt decision. But I was a pre-med student. I wasn't forestry, fisheries, natural resources, nothing like that. I didn't start doing that work till I joined the Puyallup tribe. I was the director of their timber fish and wildlife program, right? In 1989, 36 years ago. But I joined them so that I could help them administer the Washington State Timber Fish and Wildlife Agreement, which became official in 1987. Quick show of hands, who's heard of it? Okay, well, I'm glad to see. And in there's like, basically it says this is something that applies to non-federal forest lands. And within the agreement, it has a cultural resource protection commitment. It's one of the 5 goals. Just like forest resources, protect water quality, protect fish resources, wildlife resources, cultural resources. And then when you get into the document, it's like, here's a chapter about the new management system, and it's going to be entitled Cultural, Archaeological and Cultural Resources. So when you're thinking, oh, cultural resources, that's archaeology. There's non-archaeological cultural resources, but it doesn't say what. But it does say in there, in the agreement, that traditional cultural activities that haven't been practiced for some time due to access problems or site conditions can be reestablished. This is 1987. What do you think the Puyallup tribe's going to think that's supposed to be about? They're going to be thinking like, geez, we haven't been on our, we got pushed out of them lands, what was it, way back in 1857? And now in 1987, they're saying, we've had access problems, which getting pushed off your lands do. and site conditions, which clear cutting forest does, and then maybe kind of keeps you from doing any of those traditional cultural activities. Now they can be reestablished, which means what? You're supposed to be able to talk about site conditions as, you know, in terms of environmental change of the forestry, the forest practices on treaty resources. And is that only salmon, or does that include maybe animals and plants too? I mean, what's hunting animals? What's gathering plants? So I'm thankful for that. And then I'm also thankful that the University of Washington held an urban forest symposium in 2024 called Native Forest and Health. That was just last month. Yay, native forest and health, right? And so we had there as a guest speaker, a keynote speaker, the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, and they talked about the community and urban forest standard that they've established. They also talked about, well, they didn't, but I wanted to. In fact, I was like, please talk about it. But it was all about the Indigenous people standard that they also established in 2022 called Recognizing and Respecting Indigenous Peoples' Rights. And there's a performance measure in there, performance measure number 3. And number 3 says, ask the Native people how they feel about the wood and the flora on your lands, and tell us how you responded. That's if you want to be SFI eligible, right? But then I'm like, how do you make sure that they do that? And they're like, oh, we don't. Might come up in a third-party audit. What if I want to complain? Oh, there's really no process. Like, okay, gold standard, but it doesn't seem like it's in the system yet. But I can also tell you that SFI has like a, what they call it, memorandum of agreement to be implemented here in Washington State, and the people in charge of that are both the large forest timberland owners and the state of Washington, DNR. So why aren't we hearing about the community and urban forest stuff? Why aren't we hearing about the Indigenous people stuff from them? They're implementing the program. So I'm like, please start talking DNR, Washington Community. In fact, doesn't the Urban Community Forest Program have a Washington Community Forestry Council? Which I know they do because I was on it like 20 years ago, and I left it because they didn't have a Native voice, and they still don't. What about the Tacoma Indian Center in 2024 and submitting a Native Health Equity Zone proposal to the State Department of Health? They want to be the ones selected for the pilot project. So who are they? What would that be about? Native Health, Equity Zone, Tacoma Indian Center? I wonder if they'll get picked. Who's heard of Tacoma Indian Center? Okay, how about Seattle Indian Center? See, Seattle's got one that's a firmly established program. Tacoma's got one that goes back 30 some years, 35 years, but it doesn't have that same history as Seattle, all that support. If you go up to Seattle right now, they've got a program called Chief Seattle Club, and it's got 150 people on staff. Tacoma Indian Center's got 3. And there's only 3 people on the board, including me, the president, right? Okay, I'm about to wrap up. There's only one more after this. So here's what I'm wishing for. Christmas is coming, right? Dear Santa, can we get some local urban forest geographic delineations? And what about some urban TFW commitments? That'd be nice. And what about this Medicine Creek Treaty Urban Forest Council? Can we see it succeed and progress? And what about upholding native land ethics and uses and ecocultural spiritual health identities? Do we have the capacity, let alone the will? And this restoring native use of local forests, what the heck he says, 56,000 natives? What's that number? Well, what that number is it's the number of people on the census that identify as being native here in Tacoma and Pierce County. How many of them do you think are Puyallup? Maybe 5,000, which means you got 50 versus 5,000. They outrank them 10 times. There's a lot of natives out here. And are they getting to use any local forests, whether they're public or private? Big question. It's the one that I'd sure like to have answered. In fact, I'd like it to just be a certainty. Yeah, we can use them. Whoever owns them, we're not going to do something bad. We want to steward them. But if you want us to steward them, we'd like to benefit from the use. There was no motivation. Make it all better for you. I mean, how colonial? Okay, so now my resolution for year 2025, I'm going to identify and enrich my programs, partnership skills, and opportunities. I want to be a better partner. I want to have better skills. I want to work more with you. I want to enhance my program's abilities to secure and utilize local urban forest restoration money. When they did the big handout of money last year about this time, we got nothing at Puyallup Tribe. Nothing, zero. Not no 1.3 million, not $1. So we know we're not represented on Washington Community Forestry Council. We know that ecocultural spiritual health identities are a new idea that nobody's really focused on. But if you want to look up a book on ecocultural identity, one came out in 2020 called Handbook of Ecocultural Identity. And it's made up of chapters from around the globe saying, yeah, it's something that everybody has. You can't escape it. It's part of who you are. But now which one do you have? That mainstream colonial identity or the one that really wants to embrace and work towards harmony with the earth? So it's up to you. Are you ecocultural? Are you spiritual? Is this about your well-being, behavioral, mental, not just physical well-being? And what's your center? What's your goal? And what about everybody that's with you? Is that their goal too? Should it be? Could it be? Do we want it to be? Where are we going with things like environmental justice, urban forest justice, gathering wild foods in the city? You can find reports on it out of Seattle, but you can't find them talking about tribes being the ones. So that's all I'm going to say. Welcome. Welcome to maybe some new ideas. Welcome to a new future. Welcome to my year's 2025 resolutions. And so here's my closing question. What is the urban forest vision for Tacoma's Native people? And we're talking the mountain Tacoma, not just the city. So here's who I am. Again, TFW program, Tacoma Indian Center. I'm also on that planning committee. And I teach cultural sovereignty up at Muckleshoot campus at the Northwest Indian College. And, cultural sovereignty, what the heck is that? Drop sovereignty, put in freedom. Cultural freedom, that's what me and my daughter teach up at Muckleshoot Tribal Campus. And she's the leader of the Feed 7 Generations Regional Food Sovereignty Program, lives over here up on 72nd Street. So with that, I thank you dearly for hearing about some of my views.
All right, thank you, Jeffrey, for your words and for your work. The presentation just is a great reminder of how long these conversations have been going on. So my hands are raised to you, to the Puyallup people, to the Muckleshoot people for your resiliency, your stewardship, and your leadership. So thank you so much. My name is Rob Crable, and I have the honor tonight to introduce our keynote speaker, the Executive Director of the Tacoma Tree Foundation, Lowell Weiss. I got to know Lowell when he first started as the new Executive Director of the Tree Foundation. At that time, I was working at the Pierce Conservation District, and I was looking for a community partner to help me plant a bunch of trees in Tacoma. So obviously, the Tree Foundation was where I turned. Both Lowell and I were fairly new at our jobs. We didn't have a ton of funding, a ton of staffing. We were starting new programs, but Lowell was determined that we would find a way to plant these trees and do it in an equitable way. Thanks to his persistence, he was able to identify a community nonprofit, the Home Ownership Center of Tacoma, that was willing to work with us. We later were able to bring the City of Tacoma's Urban Forestry Program on board with support for the program. And within a couple of months, this ragtag group of folks managed to cobble together the first branch out event in February of 2022. I am happy to say that just last weekend, the Tree Foundation hosted its fourth branch out event, and they brought in over 50 volunteers who planted 274 trees at 101 homes in Tacoma, particularly those in our areas that have low tree canopy. I remain impressed and amazed at just how much this event has grown, and more importantly, how much this community continues to show up for trees in Tacoma. And it's more than just showing up at our planting events. I have seen folks come to our city council meetings, to our planning commission meetings, and advocate for strong tree protections. Because people made it clear that trees are a top priority in the city, the Planning Commission, which I'm a member of, developed and recommended strong tree protections for the Home in Tacoma zoning update, our city's plan to increase housing density within our city. Like many of you, I was disappointed that several of these tree requirements were weakened by our city council and that every single anti-tree amendment was passed unanimously and without debate. So to the city councilors who join us tonight and who come to our events, I appreciate you being with us, but we need more from you. We need a tree champion on city council. And this is particularly important because we have seen that there are members on this council who are pushing an anti-tree agenda that continue to pit our urban forestry goals against our urban housing goals. And we know that we don't have to sacrifice a healthy canopy for affordable and abundant housing in the city of Tacoma. Now, there is good news. While several of the protections for trees were weakened, with the passage of Home in Tacoma on Tuesday night, our city now has, for the first time in its history, protections and requirements for trees when it comes to new development. This is a huge step forward and truly a milestone for Tacoma's trees. We went from no rules or requirements at all to having a framework that we can work with, build upon, and improve. We've reached this point because our community advocated for trees throughout the Home in Tacoma process. And because of that, we were able to avoid some of the worst attacks of taking tree protections completely out of the Home in Tacoma code, which was a real possibility. We also secured a commitment from Council Member Christina Walker that at the start of 2025, we will be starting a process to develop a citywide tree protection code. So that is something that we should build upon and be very proud of. So there is definitely a lot of work ahead, more room for us to grow. But we have also come a long way, and a lot of that is in large part thanks to the Tree Foundation and to the leadership of Lowell Weiss. Since that first branch out event, I have continued to get to know Lowell as a volunteer, as a fellow city commissioner, and as one of his dog's best friends. Lowell leads from a place of empathy and compassion. His team sees him as a partner in their work and as a steadfast mentor. When he is speaking to groups of volunteers and partners, he exudes a sense of joy and optimism. Since becoming the executive director of the Tree Foundation, Lowell has built new relationships with community partners. He's grown the foundation staff from 2 to 5 full-time staff members. He's stewarded the board, and he's established community-driven and equity-centered tree planting and educational programs. Under his leadership, the Tree Foundation has turned a bunch of tree-hugging hippies into a tree-planting machine. And this community continues to grow every single day. None of this happened overnight, but with patience and determination, Lowell has led the Tree Foundation to where it is today. And for that, I think we should all be eternally grateful. So it is my great honor and privilege to welcome my friend and yours, Lowell Weiss, to the stage. Is this for you?
That's the one.
Okay.
Evening, everybody. Great to see you. Thanks for coming out. State of the Urban Forest. The last time we did this was 1.5 years ago, and a lot has changed in 1.5 years. For one thing, the room was smaller. I think if we keep doing this, we're going to be in the Tacoma Dome eventually. Since we kind of pattern this on State of the Union address, I'm going to need this half of you to cheer at everything I say. This half of you glare ominously. And since I'm a former college professor, I need half of you to also fall asleep. That's going to make me feel really comfortable. No, I'm really happy to be here and talk about trees, but in a different way. This is going to be kind of a part update on what's happening with not only Tacoma, but Pierce County, and then also a little bit about what's happening with Tacoma Tree Foundation. So thanks so much for being interested, for being partners. I see a lot of you out there who have planted trees with us, your hands in the dirt. I see people who have been part of our climate leadership cohort. And just however you got here, thank you for being here. I also want to say thanks a lot to Rob for that introduction, and to Jeffrey, of course, for your leadership, your words. I'm still learning from you, and I feel like I learn something new every time I hear you talk about the native history of this area and also about the forest. So what is the state of the urban forest? I'm going to try to bring some joy and some hope alongside probably some bad news that you'll also have to hear, which you might come to expect. Because I feel like with urban forestry, sometimes it's one step forward, one step back. It's a little bit of a dance. But the big picture is that this is a movement that is growing. And you're all a part of it just by being here in the room and caring about these issues. So thank you. Big picture, this is what's going on. Pierce County is being rapidly urbanized and deforested. Those things kind of go hand in hand. And so that's our history in this region. And this is my one of my favorite symbols of that culture that we have here in Tacoma, the kind of pride of just cutting down massive trees. That's kind of who we are. And I think we're in the process of changing that. But along with population growth comes some really hard challenges. And I think that city of Tacoma, having had its boundaries here, for over 100 years, we have to figure out how we're going to adapt, how we're going to have environmental benefits alongside more housing to alleviate this housing crisis that we're in. And so we've got urbanization, we've got deforestation. This is the story of the current time, I think. It's just a reminder too that trees do not happen by accident. Trees in the city are always here, whether by neglect or by design. The trees are here and we have to plan for them and design proactively if we want to have more of them. So I'm going to share a little bit tonight about not only what Tacoma's doing, but what's happening in other communities in Pierce County. And I'm really excited to be sharing some research that we did in the last year and a half around tree policy. Now, it's kind of nerdy sometimes to talk about tree policy, but the bottom line is, if you want to grow your tree canopy, you have to figure out how to make it harder to cut down trees and how to make it easier to plant them. That's pretty much it. You have to incentivize planting and maintenance of trees while preventing unnecessary cutting. And the cities that are making progress on that are doing just that. But it takes a lot of resources and it takes a lot of buy-in from the community. So in Tacoma, I think we're kind of early in our journey on this. There's a lot more people that know about urban forestry now, and there's a lot more of us working on it, but we have a long way to go. So with that being said, if you haven't seen this before, it's a map I recommend. It's called the Tree Equity Score, and this just shows where we are in kind of urban areas of Pierce County. The greener areas are more treed and they have more equity and opportunity. The areas that are orange, like where we're sitting tonight, this neighborhood has 7% tree canopy. It has a lot of diversity of race and ethnicity, and it has a lot of people living in poverty with low incomes. This is also my neighborhood. I live up the street from here and I walk by this building many times a week. But this is kind of the story. So if you see this, you see that the trees are not distributed equitably and that areas that have been underinvested in continue to struggle and be behind when it comes to having the benefits that trees provide. So I encourage you to go and you can click around on this map sometime and you can see how your census block is doing compared to other parts of Pierce County and the nation. So what's going on in Tacoma? These are some trees across the street from my house. I brought a lot of photos of trees, surprise. In the past 12 months, as Rob alluded to, I think the city of Tacoma has made a lot of progress. We said goodbye to our century-old tree ordinance. We said yes to a new set of codes and laws for street trees or trees on public property. And that was a really heavy lift. And I think we should be very proud that we now have modern day codes regulating the planting and care of trees in the right of way. So, yes. And then, as Rob mentioned, just on Tuesday, the package called Home in Tacoma was passed. And Home in Tacoma is all about residential property. So the city is kind of thinking about what rules should we have on private property, not just public, not just street trees. And so knowing that the Home in Tacoma effort is all about the balance of housing and trees and how can we get more of both, what we ended up seeing was some progress on these design standards, like Rob was mentioning. So now there are some design guidelines, and when you change what a residential property looks like in Tacoma, you have to account for some landscaping. You have to show that there are trees in your plan. And that is going to be a good thing because we're going to leave some space for trees in the future landscape. Whether or not those trees survive is another question. But there are some incentives for keeping trees that you have on the site and also for planting new ones. So that's a good thing, and it is a step forward. So in the last 12 months, we've seen progress both in the street and on private property, and we should commend the city of Tacoma for doing that. So now the bad news. Unfortunately, a series of amendments were passed really at the last minute. In the past month, Home in Tacoma changed from something that I was full-throated supporting all the way into something that does not preserve trees. And so I think you'll see, if you're following this, there were a whole bunch of amendments that kind of carved up what were the tree protections that we all were kind of promoting and expecting. And what we ended up with is a situation where developers are going to be allowed to clear cut lots before getting their permits. And when they ask the city, hey, can I develop this lot? It doesn't have any trees on it. They don't have to pay any penalties. So we're kind of at the status quo. That's what we've had for 140 years. So I don't think very much has changed when it comes to how the development process is going to happen in Tacoma. So that means that we have some work to do. We've got some more work ahead of us for having actual tree protections, because although the language of Home in Tacoma and the press releases talk about finding that balance between housing and trees, how it's going to play out on the ground is probably a net loss of tree canopy. So we know that protecting mature trees is a really important strategy. And this is just an example of the kind of development that we can see when there aren't really that many landscaping standards for a property. And this is the front and back of the same building. This is in the Lincoln neighborhood. And it just kind of shows you what the experience might be of living on this property. So it's very important that when we design new homes for people, we also design green amenities and make space for plants that are going to bring those benefits of trees right next to people's homes. So my take on Home in Tacoma is that the city had this chance. It felt to me like our big chance to have actual tree protections. And there were recommendations from the Planning Commission. There were recommendations from professional consultants that studied all the industry standards, and City Council said, I guess not. We don't need to do that. So they walked away from having that right balance, protecting trees on private property. And they said a lot of nice things about trees and why we need them. But at the end of the day, they voted for all these amendments that carved up Home in Tacoma. So I thought earlier this year that Home in Tacoma was going to be the way that we got a tree preservation ordinance in Tacoma. And unfortunately, that did not play out that way. But what we did see was a lot of energy at those meetings and a lot of people speaking up for trees. So that is a big change from 3 or 4 years ago. More and more people like yourselves are aware of the urban forestry needs and these problems with our local laws. And you're here tonight, and we're going to be back for more. I would say next year, we have to hold the city council accountable for that promise to take up tree preservation citywide in 2025. Another couple things that are kind of rays of sunshine, I would say. The city of Tacoma has recently done another flyover of our city and mapped our tree canopy data. So in sometime early 2025, we're going to have new data, very detailed data about the condition of our tree canopy and where the trees are. I do not expect to see an increase in tree canopy. We could hope that it stays the same, but the good news is that we'll have data sooner than we expected. Okay, moving right along. I want to talk about a couple things that are happening out in Pierce County as well, and that we were a part of this year. Raise your hand if you're involved in the heat mapping effort. Any volunteers from heat mapping? Yay, thank you. So this is a project that arose kind of out of opportunity, but also because of good partnerships. And we worked with Pierce County government and with the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department to wrangle volunteers and go drive around unincorporated Pierce County on a really hot day to find out where the hottest places are in unincorporated and some of these other cities outside Tacoma. Tacoma already has heat data. These other areas in the urban area around Tacoma did not have that data. So we sent 16 teams of volunteers at 6 a.m., 2 p.m., and I think 7 p.m. to go track this data and find out what was the difference on a hot day. We found that there was a max temperature difference of 14 degrees from a cool spot to a hot spot. And this is kind of what the map looked like. These are the lines are the routes. And a consulting team did the mapping and kind of took all those temperatures and put them together, and this was the result. So the blue areas are cooler, and Lakewood and Gig Harbor have a lot of cool areas and a lot of trees. And some of these other areas are hotter. And it's not a perfect correlation with tree canopy. That's important to note. But this shows you where people are most vulnerable and potentially where tree planting could make a difference in the future. So really excited to have been a part of this. And I want to just show kind of how this data could be used in the future. This is on the right-hand side. This is the heat map of Tacoma, city of Tacoma data from a few years ago. And on the left is a tool that was developed partly informed by this heat map of where we should prioritize tree planting. So the City of Tacoma Urban Forestry team put this together, and we're using this in our community tree program partnership to help make sure that the trees we're planting are going to the areas that need them the most. So that's what I'm really excited about for this heat data of Pierce County. That means that other cities that want to develop programs around this have the data, and they can make similar interventions, similar programs. We can propose programs in Fife and in Lakewood and other places where we really need trees. So that's a really exciting development from the last year. And I want to thank our partners at the county and the health department for bringing us into this project and helping us get all that together. So thank you. Another big project that I wanted to share tonight, and this was from about a year ago. Again, we had a little funding from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. And we wanted to get at this question of what are the tree policies around Pierce County, not just in the city of Tacoma, which I feel like I know fairly well. So I want to shout out Kenzie Knapp, who was one of our staff members last year. Kenzie and I spoke with representatives from 10 different municipalities around Pierce County and asked the staff members, what kind of tree policies do you have? What kind of plans are on the books? And it was very insightful, very informative. Some of the takeaways that we found, some communities have good tree policies. Some are better than Tacoma's tree policies. So that was kind of encouraging because there are examples that we can follow. Geographic area really matters. Tacoma is an old city with a huge area. So the kind of services that are required for planting and maintaining trees are in correspondence with how big the city is. So some of these smaller cities like Fircrest or I don't know, other examples. Bonnie Lake is a little bit smaller. They're able to offer a higher level of service just because they have smaller geography. But we also saw a correlation with kind of the generational wealth of a community and the presence of large mature trees with how much they were investing in protecting those trees. So cities like Fircrest and University Place have stronger regulations around trees and better enforcement. And they just have a different history. They developed at different times. And I think it's really important to keep that in mind. But there are things that cities can do to make it harder to cut down trees and easier to plant trees. And I think that by looking at some of these policies, we learned some of those examples. And we're really excited to be talking with our partners at Washington State Department of Natural Resources, which are kind of working on similar questions statewide. And we're going to be sharing this information about Pierce County soon, in case you want to see our massive spreadsheet where we compared all the different communities. But I came away with that with some hope that cities are paying more attention to their tree policies. And I'm hopeful too that people that live in the more vulnerable places eventually will be protected by better policies. Because right now, most vulnerable communities do not have common sense tree regulations. So it is often those more affluent communities that have those protections of trees. I'm going to be also sharing this information in a couple weeks at a group called the Pierce County Climate Conversations, which is elected officials from all around the county. And they have chosen trees as their issue to talk about how we implement climate solutions. And so I'm really excited to be on a panel with Mike Carey from the city of Tacoma and several others talking about where cities are in their journey and how they can just get started. So that's really exciting work. The other piece of this that I wanted to kind of mention is that there's a statewide effort right now that Mike and I are, and also Hannah, who's in the room, are on the Tree Equity Collaborative Steering Committee. So there's a statewide effort with DNR and American Forests that's really focusing on how do we build tree equity across communities all across Washington state. So understanding, again, where trees are needed the most, and then what changes can be made or how can people get started. And so that group is really exciting. It's we hosted a learning lab in Tacoma earlier this year. And it's that kind of collaboration that we're starting to see, not only in Tacoma, but regionally and statewide. And that's one of the things that's given me a lot of hope right now, because we're part of a bigger movement. So I wanted to share one tree story. We get tree stories from people all the time. It's one of the best parts of our jobs. People come up to us and say, I had this tree when I was a kid and it was such and such tree and this is what we did. Other people say, my neighbor has this tree and it drops leaves on my property all the time and I can't stand it. And somehow they think that we are excited about hearing the bad tree stories. Anyway, this is one tree story that I had to share. I have this friend, his name is Jerry. He works in construction and he works on houses, and he shared with me this year, there's this house he'd been working on off and on for a few years. And there was an older woman living in this house nearby, and her curtains were always open. And so sometimes they would wave at each other when he was going to the job site. But one day he noticed that this lady's curtains were closed. And he didn't know why. He thought it was weird. Went on with his day. And a few weeks later, he saw her on the sidewalk or something. And he said, hey, I noticed that your curtains are closed. You never used to close them. And she said, yeah, it's because my neighbor cut that really big tree down across the street. And now my home is too hot and I have to have the curtains closed. So there was something about this story, of course, that struck me. Because that person didn't have any control over the decisions of the neighbor, but it was really affecting her quality of life. And it led to that loss of connection, right? The closing of the window is something that I've been thinking about a lot, and something that we're thinking about with like the meaning of social connection and the ways that trees are not just environmental, right? Trees are a social connector for us. You see that at our events when people go on a tree walk. You see that when people come to appreciate trees in the city in a different way or see things from a new light, that they walk away changed, and they also want to share and share this connection with other people. So these are some things that I am thinking about with that tree story, but all the time, like how can we be more connected as humans in this city? And how do trees and nature help us to thrive, help us to get to know each other better? So that's kind of what it's all about for me as I do this work. And having the chance to meet more and more of you, more neighbors all the time who care about this work too, is something that really keeps me going. So thank you very much. So I have more pictures. This is a picture from Saturday when we were during branch out, and Vanessa is the person in the center who's the homeowner receiving this tree. She was pretty excited. I really like talking to Vanessa. She grew up in Honduras, and she also works at an environmental nonprofit randomly, but one in California. And she was so excited because she did not have that knowledge of how to plant a tree. And we had the knowledge, and we knew that that was a good spot for this tree. That tree is going to get really big, and she was really excited about bringing more shade and kind of privacy to the house that they live in South Tacoma. So we don't get to have this experience every day, but this is kind of what we're always working towards. This is the fun part, especially of what we do. There's a lot of work that we do that's behind the scenes and behind computers, but we know that we can have these kind of experiences and meet neighbors like Vanessa. So what I want to say kind of as I'm starting to wrap up here, what I can tell from where I'm standing is that more and more people are supporting what we're doing at Tacoma Tree Foundation because they see these issues that we see. They see what trees are doing for communities. They see this place where we live in a new way when they go on a tree walk with Sarah, or they experience particular trees in their neighborhood that they've never noticed before. And they do feel often a sense of loss when a big tree comes down. We hear questions and complaints and stories when trees come down, just like the city government hears on a regular basis. And then people also see the impact to the neighborhood when we show up and we bring resources to the neighborhood. So as Rob kind of mentioned, in the last year and a half since our last State of the Urban Forest, our capacity has really grown at the Tree Foundation. We, in addition to creating those new staff positions, we bought a new truck and we have a trailer. So we're no longer using our personal vehicles as much to move trees around. Thank you. Our truck is called Cedro. He runs on electricity, not gas, and it's really fun. Yeah, so things are moving along and changing a lot. I feel like this is a picture, most recent picture of our staff team. Not everybody's pictured here, but we've got several full-time people and then lots of people willing to help on an hourly basis. And everyone has been just amazing. And we're growing and learning all the time, learning on the job, problem solving, figuring out how to be a brand new nonprofit. It feels like we've been here a while, but this month is our 6th anniversary as a nonprofit organization. So I'm also really excited to share that in 2024, with all this extra capacity, we broke a record for the number of trees planted. And we've planted and distributed over 4,000 trees to Pierce County communities. The majority of those trees were planted in neighborhoods that need them the most. And we did this all with tons of support and materials from the City of Tacoma Urban Forestry team, from Pierce Conservation District, American Forests, and of course, our generous donors. I also want to say that thanks to our fellow Tacoma nonprofit, Earth Economics, we have some data about the economic impact of some trees that we've planted. Earth Economics reached out to us. They said they really want to partner and help us figure something out. Like, what can we do to help, basically? How can we leverage our knowledge of ecosystem services to help Tacoma Tree Foundation? So we said, well, we did a project last year called Green Blocks McKinley Hill. It was part of the community tree program with the city. And we said, here's our data, tell us what you learn. So through that project, we planted 228 new trees along the street in the McKinley Hill neighborhood. And the program costs were estimated at $115,000. So by using an analysis that integrates those ecosystem services, basically the benefits provided by nature, Earth Economics was able to project that if all those trees are allowed to survive and grow for 50 years, they will generate $17 million in ecosystem services. Think about that. So those trees, if they are allowed to live, they will pay for themselves 30 times over. That's amazing. And it's not just the kind of stormwater filtration and some of these other things that we think of. The vast majority of that economic impact is avoiding hospitalizations and fatalities from urban heat. So the urban heat island mitigation, basically keeping people from going to the hospital and dying from heat-related illness, that is what's responsible for generating that amount of value. So 228 trees, $17,400,000 in ecosystem services over 50 years. That's some impressive benefit. And I think that's interesting too to just note, when the city builds infrastructure, what does it do with value? It goes down immediately. As soon as you put a street in the ground or something, the value goes down. Trees do the opposite. They increase in value over time. And so it's really exciting to have some numbers to share with you tonight that's fresh off the press from Earth Economics, just showing how that matters in terms of community health and local economy. The other thing to note is that, those numbers that they crunched, that is equivalent to 4 people not dying in the next 50 years. 228 trees, 4 people not dying from heat. Really amazing. And so if you kind of multiply that by the 4,000 trees that we planted this year, and if we can hope and pray that those trees survive, they are doing some really important work for us that you can't replace in any other way. So I'm running out of time, but a little bit about what's coming up for Tree Foundation. We are receiving next year additional grant funding from Department of Natural Resources. So we're gonna bring our Green Blocks program to the Hilltop neighborhood for 3 years in a row. And that's really exciting because it's our chance to kind of go deep and to be present in a neighborhood, build some deeper relationships for a longer time. Because so far in our history, we've had to kind of pack up and leave after the project is over. So we're really excited that Hilltop is gonna be the place where we try a sustained effort and what can we learn from year to year? How can we change and grow? We're also partnering with City of Tacoma Urban Forestry on a grant that will allow us to plant trees along the corridors that kids use to walk and bike to schools in South Tacoma. So we're really excited about that because trees help slow down traffic. And when we wrote this grant, Lisa Kenny at the city wrote the grant, and it was ranked #1 in the state of Washington because it's making that connection, the environment and the social benefit. Traffic calming, preventing kids from getting hit by cars. Trees can help with that. So we're really excited about that work. And those are just two of the big projects that we've got coming up for next year. We're going to continue to provide free educational events, and funding from Tacoma Creates goes a long way to helping that. We're also going to keep on leading the climate leadership cohort with City of Tacoma and Pierce County. So our programs that we're offering are elevating not only urban forestry, but also climate resilience, public health, environmental justice. And I think we're also helping to put those ideas in the minds of our local policymakers. So as your community tree nonprofit, we're working with partners to reduce barriers to having trees in neighborhoods. We're creating free access to those life-saving and life-giving plants. So when you give and donate to the Tree Foundation, you are caring for your neighbors, your city, and future generations. We know that our work is essential to Tacoma becoming a vanguard city for urban forestry, but we do not yet have the kind of sufficient, consistent funding that we need to keep us afloat between those big grant projects. So tonight we're announcing our end of year campaign. We have a goal of raising $25,000 by the end of the year in order to continue this critical work that we're doing to build trust in the community and keep on connecting people with plants. We're making an extra special appeal right now to monthly donors. We would love to have more monthly donors so that we can keep the lights on in between those big projects, because our income kind of goes like this throughout the year. So really appreciate all of those of you in the room who are donors, and especially who are giving monthly, because that is really essential to a kind of a startup nonprofit to be successful. So $25,000. I look around, I see about 100 people in this room. If everyone on average could give $250, we would meet that goal tonight. So I just want to say thank you to all of you for your support. If you are not in a position to donate, we totally understand, but we are so excited about doing this work, and we need your help to keep on doing it. I also just wanted to close by saying, given the political events of the last few weeks, I'm taking hope in what's happening at the local level. And I think that what we're doing is a big part of that. So when you give to Tacoma Tree Foundation, you're not only investing in our mission, but you're also helping us create green jobs, supporting the local economy, and you're investing in your own community and a future generations in a way that has a regional and a global impact as well. So thank you so much for considering, and that's all I have to say. I actually have one more thing to say. As part of our program, we have invited my good friend Jamina Shannon to be a respondent. I see you in the back. Come on up. Jamina, I met Jamina, I think 1.5 years ago, or maybe 2 years ago, in a very organic way. She came to our table in Hilltop, and she was very excited about what we're doing. And in the last couple of years, she's gotten more and more involved with the Tree Foundation and kind of seen us from different angles. So she became first a volunteer at our table, and then she joined our tree stewards training. And then she became a tree captain so she can lead teams of volunteers. And then she also joined our climate leadership cohort. So she learned about what it means to take local climate action and put together an amazing project. So I'm really happy to bring up Jamina to just have the last word on some things that she heard tonight.
All right. Good evening, y'all. It's really good to be here with a bunch of tree lovers, huggers, and everyone in between, right? So I just wanted to really start off by sharing a little bit of my tradition. So in my tradition, from a very young age, we are taught that we are stewards of the land. We are taught we are stewards, and the earth is our teacher. We are the students, and the earth is our teacher. A prophetic practice we are taught and passed forward is, If the hour, the last moment on earth were to come upon you when you are planting the tree, finish planting the tree. That is the great reverence that our tradition holds for the very soil that we live on and the very trees that, help us to exist, right? So I carry that with me. So in regards to the value of life, Lowell mentioned that through this work, 4 lives can be saved cyclically. So our tradition teaches us that the value of human life is so great that if you were to save even 1 life, it is as if you have saved all of humanity. So I volunteer as a means of honoring this tradition, as a means of honoring the very soil that contributes to our existence and all of the stewards of the earth who have come before me and stand alongside me with TTF and otherwise. As a holistic life coach in the Pacific Northwest, I frequently teach practical somatic exercises that first are connecting folks with themselves and creation. And so what that looks like in a very simplistic form is go outside. Many of us grew up, being told, go outside and play. I know I did, especially in Tacoma. As a Tacoma native, I grew up on the hilltop. I still have family that lives on the hilltop right on 19th. My children, they participate in activities right on the hilltop. I have Bay Area roots, Berkeley, Bay Area, okay, West Coast, searching the room, got any Bay Area? And so this work is incredibly important to me and very, very necessary. So when I do this work as a holistic life coach, I'm thinking about the overall wellness, our well-being, and our connection to ourselves and also the soil and the environment around us. So the first step is go outside, right? And for adults, yes, go outside and play. It is okay. We get to have some fun too, but also to notice and to listen, to really touch the soil and connect with it and develop a relationship. And that is something that I really value about the work that we're doing, is that we are really focused on relationships with the environment around us and with our community that is all coexisting. And so we plant seeds. It is no surprise, I'm sure, that my life coaching practice is called Plant Deeds Wellness. So when I came across TTF's free tree giveaway at the Arboretum at Wright Park's annual Bite of Black business event, I instantly knew that something as simple yet long-lasting and impacting, like gifting free trees to our local community, was where I wanted and needed to be. Seeing young and old and folks of all walks of life and everyone in between getting excited about trees and learning the 5 W's, the who, what, when, where, why, all of that, just about trees and planting them and how to do it, was extremely refreshing for me. I see that the education that this organization is trying to do, the outreach, the community care, has a very deep focus in relationships and honoring the indigenous brothers and sisters and stewards whose land we are guest residents on, and doing it in such an equitable way to truly plant deeds and seeds in the soil and in human hearts. I soon joined as a volunteer, then a donor, a climate leader in the capstone program, and a recent tree captain. It doesn't take much at all, even with a very full life as a parent and a business owner and a community organizer. It doesn't take much at all to stay connected and to connect human hearts and to really care about the city and the world that we live in. So I always get really excited when I see young people in the audience at events like this, because it's so important and impactful. So it really does take a village and a community to get out into yards and parks and neighborhoods and to really be caring about our air quality, the environment, and the future of the soil that we work to honor. And it gives us so much abundance in return. I can also relate to the story that Lowell shared about the neighbor who spoke about the tree that went down and that loss of connection. In my neighborhood in Fern Hill, we similarly had a tree right across from our home that was, chopped down, and it did provide a lot of shade for our home. And also a tree in our next door neighbor's yard that was huge. And I remember so clearly the day that that tree went down. It was a huge, beautiful tree. And we used to sit in our backyard with our girls and just look up. It had so much life, and you could tell it had so much inhabitants in that tree. And so when it went down, I remember my eldest daughter sitting in the backyard for hours and just staring over at this newly blank canvas and just sharing stories about that tree going down and what she remembers of it before. And to be able to build the connection with nature in young hearts as young as 8 and 6 and 3 with the neighborhood and the environment and with nature is such a deep seed planted at such an early age that I really feel necessary to preserve that. And so I do see what Tacoma Tree Foundation, a part of what they're doing is they're doing that. They're connecting young hearts as well, the next generation. So through the work that, the volunteer work that I've been able to do, I'm now able to not only plant trees in Tacoma and give back to the community that has poured so much into me, but I'm also able to plant fruit trees and teach other folks how to plant fruit trees, even as far as Whidbey Island. I go out to Whidbey Island and I volunteer on the Black Seed Farm and Agroecology Center, and they have, been really doing a lot of new development there and planting fruit trees and building relationships with the community there. And so to be able to take the seeds that are being planted here in Tacoma and to be able to take them to Whidbey Island and to make those relationships and connections and have those folks also in return come out here and support and be a part of our community is really a part of this work and community building as well. When I was doing the capstone program, I was also able to begin the process of planning and hosting tree planting parties and collaborating with the DPAVE program to host a neighborhood block party. So that way, even if folks weren't 100% excited as I was about planting trees or, depaving, at least they know about more of the resources that our community offers. And that I see as planting that seed and as a first step forward. So you see, you don't really have to be a tree hugger, as was noted before, or a full-out TTF lover, although you should. But one thing to keep in mind is that love is a verb. It requires action. So whichever action you are able to take, I leave with you this final reminder from my tradition. There is none amongst us who plants a tree or sows seeds, and then a bird or a person or an animal eats from it, but is regarded as a charitable gift for them. So what charitable seeds will you sow? What trees will you plant? And what mark will you leave on the earth that sustains us all? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hi, everyone. Thanks for sitting tight through hearing about the state of the urban forest. I'm good. I'm glad we left on that note, talking about love and the medicine of those good words. Yeah, you heard a lot about the good, the bad, the ugly, the lovely of the Tacoma's forest. I really appreciate you all making the magic happen. We are going to keep the raffle magic going for a little while longer, back in that corner over there. And we do hope you stay with us for a little while to mingle and to meet each other or kind of rejoin old friends if that's the case. And Adela has a little bit more information about the raffle. You don't?
Well, kind
Come
of.
on.
Yeah, I mean, sort of. Thanks to Jenny Wetzel, Donna Thompson, and Janelle Krillich. Applause, please. We have amazing things at the raffle table for your holiday shopping. The ticket is one ticket is $10. We have art by Jen Obata. We have a beautiful mug that has Tacoma on it, in addition to many beautiful other things that you can look at. There's t-shirts, but more than anything, we really want you to stay and mingle with us and celebrate trees, celebrate this community. Thanks to the Tacoma Garden Club, we're also offering you food. And we cannot thank Peaks and Pints enough. They have made possible this social gathering. So you are what's going to make it amazing. So please mingle, stay. Thank you so much for being here. And thanks to our many speakers again tonight for making this an amazing moment to come together.